We have a series of presentations with the title The Road to World Class, and we're going to go through them just right one after the other, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So I'll introduce one after another. Karin will start. Karin All, who's President of the Fibre to the Home, the Council in Europe. Thank you very much. Karin will start with a 10-minute presentation. Simon Barrett, Head of Channel and Proposition Development at Avanti Communications, will follow. And then David Crawford, who's Manager of the Centre for White Space Communications. So we'll have some short presentations, one after the other, questions at the end, and then into the breakout sessions. So may I introduce Karin, and you can start now.
Thank you. I would like to start by thanking you for inviting me. Yesterday evening we had a dinner, and I was very encouraged then to listen to what was said around the table, and listening into the morning session and the speakers here and the minister, it was just even more encouraging. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm traveling around Europe a lot, visiting different countries and different conferences and workshops, and this is an event that is pretty new for me. So Scotland is the first time. I've been to other next-gen events before, but it's always fun to be back. So I'm the president of the board for Fibre to the Home Council Europe, and I'm not sure that all of you know about the conference we have, so that is the thing that most people know us through or via. But we're an industry organization, a standalone organization, which I think is important to mention, because some of us that I meet here always talk about the Commission and Brussels, and we have our base there, but we are a standalone organization talking about FTTH. Some of the statements we do is in line with operators, some with communities, some with governments, but we create our own mind and our own positions. So a lot of the things we produce that you can reach through our website and the positions we communicate is actually based on our members and the knowledge we build up. And we were founded back in 2004 by mainly 4 or 5 companies, component vendors on the FTTH market, which Ericsson, Cisco, Alcatel, those familiar names. But we've grown pretty fast today, so we're about 150 or 160 members today, all over Europe. Mainly in the central parts, but spread all over Europe. And the vision we have is a sustainable future enabled by FTTH. And to reach that vision, of course, we work hard to spread the message about how to get it more accessible for people out there, so the access network to be built out. And we talk about FTTH, nothing else. So the question about future-proof broadband and connectivity, that's something that you touched already. And we had long discussions about it yesterday. I'm pretty sure we all know that fiber to the home, or fiber to everything, like people talk about a lot, is the key thing, and the thing that we will end up in the long run. However, I totally understand that we will see incremental steps. But for us, that is not what we communicate or talk about. We talk about fiber to the home, the business case, and what to do with it. And it's not only about the speed. The speed is something that we talked about for years and years. And before that, we talked about technology. But technology is there. We know about the speed. So what can we do? We're pretty sure that it's not the way to watch or look or to value your connection. It's about seeing it as an enabler, because when you have it, you can use it for so many reasons in so many different ways. And it's also a way of including people. If you see to the Eastern European side of Europe and also the Nordic countries, they have totally understand the value to include people, to build out to the multi-dwelling units and the public housings as a first step to get people included. And that's also where we see the most innovative services and content coming today in the networks. So that's very important for us to talk about. And the second question I often get is if there is any demand for fiber today, fiber to the home. Well, that's very variant, and it differs because of the transparency in the communication. It's a lot about communication. We have done several reports on this. You can find it on our website. When the customer knows about FTTH or has an option to choose between FTTH and different access technologies, they usually go for FTTH, and they're also willing to pay more for it. But of course, it's not only the FTTH connection, it's also what they get when they subscribe for it. So it's about content, it's about the possibility to act on it and to do something more. And that is, I think, hard for us to describe today, what the end customer will do with its connection, because it's up to the individual person. We could hear about muffins or bakery or whatever, and I think that is an important part for people, to do whatever they want. And that is also a motivation for them to get the connection and get included in this movement that we see today. The biggest project we do and the biggest thing we are quoted about, I would say, is the ranking and the panorama. And the panorama is a worldwide health check for countries and regions, and we do it on a global scale, we do it on a European scale. And if you look at these countries or regions, you can clearly see that Europe is not as big as the others, but when we compare it, we usually do that in combining Russia and Ukraine with Europe. Still, we're pretty far behind Asia Pacific. But if we look at the countries in Europe, you can clearly see that we have some countries having pretty good penetration rate in the networks today. However, there are still a few countries missing, and definitely the bigger economies in Europe. We often talk about the UK missing. We see interesting projects coming along now and deployments, and I heard also about the aim and the targets for Scotland. So that is definitely interesting, and we follow that really, really close. Germany is also a country that we follow. Germany is happening at the moment. And France also launched and announced a new fiber plan. So of course, things are happening. Out of these 22 countries, 11 of them, I think it is, come from the Eastern European side. They are heavily investing, they are heavily deploying, because they see the future. And they don't want to invest money in a new upgrading copper network or such. They go directly on the fiber. So they have different incentive to do so. But it's interesting to see how the sharp discussion and how the sharp decision-making has actually given proof of ranking. Also, you can see the Nordic countries. The Nordic countries has usually had the top position in the ranking. Now things are actually happening, and they are starting to move around. So they are definitely challenged by other countries. And also, it's interesting to see that Russia and Ukraine, even though they have such a huge population, they are pretty high up in the ranking. And this is almost the same picture, but it gives you an overview of how the homes passed and the connected rate looks like. And we've analyzed these numbers in our committees, our working committees. We could divide it into different topologies, technologies, investment plans, digital agendas, and such. So if you have any questions and want to know more, I can tell you we have lots of information. So just get back to us, and we can for sure supply you with some detailed information on your region or your country. The race to fiber maturity is actually pretty interesting. If you talk about the digital agenda for Europe, the target is 50% by 2020. And given the deployment rate today in Europe, we can't see that happening. We can't see the target being reached by FTTH. As you see on the bottom of the slide, you have the European countries. So as it looks like now, we won't reach it until 2022, and that is 20%, the fiber maturity, the penetration rate in the country. But things can definitely go much faster, and it can go faster if we see the big nations start investing and actually carrying out the plans. So that is something that we are putting in a lot of time to discuss with them and to be there to motivate them and support them in the decision making. But it's also interesting to see that we have some countries already reaching that, and they are using their message also out in Europe to support other countries today, which is really good, and it's helpful, because I think best practice is really needed. And for sure, I'm pretty confident that this is the future, and the future is here now. We can see so many initiatives today, and just the momentum that I listened to here today, I'm pretty confident that you also realize that. Before I leave the stage for my other speakers here in the panel, I would like to invite you all to the next conference we have. The last one this year was in London. Next time it's in Stockholm. So it will be much more chilly and probably a little bit snow. But you're most welcome. We already have opened the sign up for it. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully, from the picture, you'll guess what I'm going to talk to you about. To start off with, I think we'll look a little bit about Avanti and what the company I work for. Avanti Communications is a UK-based satellite operator. We've been heavily supported by UK government to, at a political level to help us become an operator in quite a difficult market to enter. We operate 2 satellites currently, one over the Azores and one over Kenya. And we provide services for carrier networks, for defence clients, for enterprises, and we also provide broadband services. Those services are available in Europe, particularly Scotland actually, where we've had a long and successful relationship with the Scottish Government, also the Middle East and Africa, and I probably spend about, I guess, 80% of my time in the Middle East Africa segment. I think I wanted to start off today, and it was a really interesting conversation this morning because from the Deputy First Minister onwards, we haven't talked about technology. And I think now we're coming into that element where we are starting to. But from my perspective, looking at the what a world-class broadband, what is a world-class broadband service? If you look at the last ITU penetration rates, the global penetration of broadband, and that's not super fast broadband, that's sort of 2 meg and below, is around about 8%. And the 8% is split quite heavily biased by Europe, which has got very heavy penetration. And if you go to Middle East, Africa, even Asia Pac to a degree, you'll find that the numbers are much, much lower. So from a perspective of where we are, we're actually in a very, very strong place. I sort of look at this as I don't think of broadband as technology, it's the enabler. It's about what it does for economics. It's about what it does for job creation, what it does for us as a nation, and the sort of industries we're going to see coming forward. If you look at the positioning currently between BT and Sky, it's interesting to see that the content is now becoming more important, really, than network. Sky is building out its own independent network, but they've got content to deliver, and they're going to deliver that on any device they can. And we're now seeing BT doing very similar this last few weeks with BT Sport starting free to broadband subscribers. At an end user level, I don't know what my expectation is for an end user. I think having gone through the launch of broadband when I was in BT, and our expectation was that people would find it faster, better, more exciting. As we move up the capability of the technology, I think our expectation of our end users is very much higher than we can probably achieve. And as people have said today, we've got a lot of work to do to actually teach people, explain to people, encourage them to use the technology to the ways that they want to use it, not the way that the market wants to. But I guess the fundamental for me is that this is not about a single technology. This is not about a fibre solution everywhere. I don't see it as a practical alternative. I thought we'd look at a broadband network, a fibre network actually. I dare to call it an interesting fibre network, I guess. This is a live network. It's a live fibre network in the North Sea. And it's got a couple of attributes that are really important for any kind of investment and rollout of any kind of telecoms network. And the first thing is that there's got to be a market out there. So if we think about the rigs nowadays up in the North Sea, the challenges for those for the oil industry is extracting oil and gas, which is much harder to get. So they are reliant more heavily nowadays on imagery, on digital imagery, on geological surveys. So there is a real market for high throughput data that has got value and actually produces an economic benefit when you consider the application that it's being deployed in. There's not much competition in the North Sea, so that's a really good perspective if you are laying out an infrastructure. And actually, although it is technically challenging, it's possible. And the network going into the Highlands and Islands now is the same as this. It's a subsea network, laid by a cable ship. But that is hard, but it's possible. The interesting thing for me about, I've had some dealings with the oil industry, probably more in the Middle East than here, but it's very conservative. Safety is of massive importance. The industry does not rush quickly into new technology. And every time that I've been involved with it, with projects with the industry, it's been interesting that the view is always resilience, fallback, and safety. There's never a plan A. There's always a plan B, and sometimes there's a plan C. And even in a network like this one, where we've got a large, high-throughput fibre network, and there's wireless networks, 120-kilometre wireless networks out there as well, there's still a satellite backup. Satellite is still used for a lot of data gathering, for SCADA applications. So the industry thinks very carefully. Having connected to the cloud, they've recognised that the one thing they have to do is stay connected to the cloud. I thought we'd look at Scotland. This was, as I said earlier, we were involved in the Broadband Reach project, and we delivered services to about 2,500 homes by satellite across the country. And this is the original spec that we worked to. And these, in 2007, provided by the Scottish Government, were the not spots. People here had nothing. Now, as we move forward into higher speed broadband networks, I will not be surprised if when we start looking at low speed or poor speed networks, this map is not replicated. So one of the things that the digital strategy needs to do is address every citizen. And these gaps will exist, and slow spots will exist, but we don't have a limitless purse available to push fibre into every single home and community across the country. The Scottish Government fortunately has a strong record of recognising that, and they've operated with hybrid networks in the Highlands and Islands particularly, as well as in our particular project, for many years. And I think that's, in terms of us moving forward on technology, we need to start thinking more about how we can deploy a hybrid network to meet the needs of the end user. There's an interesting piece of research that's just come out from Boston Consulting Group. This research has been targeted at telcos and about how they should roll out a high-speed network. So, although there are some very good lessons in there, and I think the fundamental is a hybrid network, which in their words they define as a mixture between fixed and mobile, because most telcos across the world operate both fixed and mobile companies. They can see a 20 to 30% saving. They have demonstrated 20 to 30% saving over a pure fibre approach, and achieving the same results in terms of EBITDA, in terms of profitability. So for me, that's a very strong message that the hybrid network approach is absolutely essential for the rollout of a digital Scotland. Now, looking at this from a perspective of where we are and the geography and the very challenging geography that we have in this country, I do not see a combined fixed and mobile network on its own succeeding in delivering the strategy. I think that strategy will be delivered by a wider combination of technologies, which will include wireless, and I believe will include satellite. From my perspective, the satellite broadband is here today, it's being used today, and I think it still remains the most cost-effective way of addressing the rural and remote population. We have ubiquitous coverage. Avanti has ubiquitous coverage. We cover every single element of Scotland, all the islands, the mainland, the whole thing. And recent advances in technology mean that we're now starting to achieve much higher throughput speeds, which are part of the equation delivering good service. So services of 50 megabit per second download, 2.5 megabit per second upload are now common and are being sold today. I think the one thing we need to think about is the opportunity that there is, whilst this massive investment is going on, to do some outside-in work. It's great that fibre networks are being built in the cities, but we can't ignore the rural populations, which actually we can serve within, literally we can serve customers within days, put customers online within days. So I think there needs to be some thought about how we bring the rural community, build in from the rural community towards the cities, as well as build out. And if you do want to talk about any of our broadband reach project, the QSAT are here today on stand S2, currently managing the contract. So from my perspective, my company and the satellite broadband industry actually bring two great things for this Digital Scotland agenda. First of all, is we're going to give you a quality network. We are giving quality services that work for customers. And secondly, we give you the flexibility to reach places you can't reach any other way, and also now commercial flexibility. All right, that's me, I think.
So good morning, I'm David Crawford and I run the Centre for Whitespace Communications at the University of Strathclyde. And what I want to do is tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. And in particular, I want to tell you a bit about a project that we were involved in to use whitespace radio technology to deliver broadband to a rural community on the Isle of Bute. So the centre was set up in 2011 by the University of Strathclyde with support from the Scottish Funding Council. And what we do is we work with industry in R&D in whitespace and related areas. Our main activities are technology R&D, but there is an element of what we do which is concerned with socio-economic research as well, in conjunction with the University of the Highlands and Islands, who is a partner in the centre. Now, with all this talk about whitespace and the Centre for Whitespace Communications, it seemed appropriate to actually spend a minute or so addressing the issue of what exactly is whitespace. And essentially, I guess in a nutshell, whitespace is portions of, or white spaces are portions of unused radio spectrum. That's essentially what they are. And if we take an example here of TV, so within the TV band, in different parts of the country, you will find that different TV transmitters will be transmitting on different frequencies, and there will be gaps. There will be channels which are not used, and the frequencies which are used and the frequencies which aren't used will vary from location to location around the country. And so if you use a white background in your slides, you get white spaces on the graph. So the obvious question is, well, can we utilize those unused portions of spectrum? Because if we can, with all the explosive growth and demand for data communications and ubiquitous connectivity and so on, cloud-based applications, improving the utilization and the efficiency of spectrum usage would be a good thing. And so if we can use those white spaces, then we can perhaps do that. But it's not that simple. There are challenges involved, and one of the main ones is that white space transmissions can't really be allowed to cause interference with the existing transmissions of the likes of television broadcasts and also some other users in that band, wireless microphones, for example, to the point where they actually interfere with TV reception, for example. But nevertheless, these challenges have been worked on and have been being worked on for a number of years. And at the moment, the US is leading the way. So the US regulator has now got regulations in place for commercial use of white space. And here in the UK, our regulator, Ofcom, is quite close to doing that as well. One thing that's kind of getting the industry quite excited is that the white spaces most regulators are following a license-exempt access model, which is interesting. I should say it's not the same as license-free. It's not a free-for-all because of this need to make sure that incumbent transmissions, primary transmissions, don't get interfered with. The access does have to be controlled, so it's not a free-for-all access, but we're talking license-exempt. And potential application for white space. There's a lot of talk about things, machine-to-machine, Internet of Things, smart cities, smart metering, and all of that good stuff, which I think white space will, alongside other technologies such as the wired infrastructure and fibre infrastructure, and indeed other wireless technologies, white space will have an important part to play in applications such as those. But what I want to do is focus on rural broadband as an application, and specifically I want to tell you a bit about a project we were involved in. It was supported by the Technology Strategy Board, and it involved 6 collaborating partners that you can see listed here on the slide. And the idea was that we would install a white space base station at the local telephone exchange in Kilcatton Bay, which is in the south side of the Isle of Bute. Now, the Isle of Bute, for those of you who don't know, you can see on the map there, it's just off the west coast of mainland Scotland. It's about 30 minutes on the ferry. And in the south side of Bute, it's a very sparsely populated rural community. It's mainly farms that are separated by, quarter of a mile or half a mile or something like that. So we have a white space base station at the telephone exchange, and that connects to various trial premises. And then from there, we have a microwave backhaul link over to the mainland that was installed by BT, one of the project partners. That's not a white space link. And then from the mainland on into the BT core network and the internet and so on, so that trialists can get access to the internet. This picture on the left here is a picture of the freestanding mast that you can see there is a white space base station, and up at the top of that are 2 white space antennas. We were trialling 2 different white space systems in this trial. The mast or the pole with the microwave dish on the left, which is attached to the building, that's the microwave backhaul, which is pointing to the mainland. And then at the trialists' premises, what we do is we install an aerial, which is, in this case, this is a standard television aerial pointing back towards the base station at the exchange. And you might just be able to make out a little box attached to the pole just beneath the aerial. That's the white space radio, and that then feeds through a Cat5 cable straight into the premises and into a normal wireless router from which the trialists can hook up their PCs or connect to their iPads or smartphones, or just in the normal way, actually. Now, as well as demonstrating the viability of using white space to provide broadband to people, one of the other aspects of the project, a key aspect, in fact, was that we wanted to be able to perform measurements on the performance of the network, but also measurements on how the white space transmissions and how they were affecting the TV reception in the area and TV signal strength, for example. So a lot of the BBC led that part of the work, and a lot of results were, a lot of data was gathered, and a lot of results are currently being collated. It's taken us quite a while to do that because it was quite an extensive measurement activity, but we're at the point where we think we're kind of almost ready to have a report, which I hope will be released fairly soon. Okay, so where next? Where do I think white space, or where are we going next with white space? There's a number of possibilities. I mean, from our point of view, the trial in Bute has been very successful in, as a first step in demonstrating the viability, the technical viability of using white space in rural and remote areas for the kind of fringes of a network where things like fibre are difficult. It's difficult to get fibre out to those parts of the network. As I mentioned, the report on the project should be coming soon, which is one thing in the immediate next step. But we're also talking about potential phase 2 options as well. And looking from a regulatory point of view, I mentioned that the US has already got regulations in place. Here in the UK, Ofcom is planning to run a pilot in the autumn of this year with what they call the full solution, which is really the regulations in place for commercial use of white space, expected to be Q2 of next year. But it's not just about the TV band. I mean, white space, the idea of white spaces has come from the TV band. It's actually come from the fact that analog television has been switched off and everything's been switched over to digital TV, and that's kind of highlighted that there is some, that's left, I guess, some spare capacity in the TV band. But it's not just about the TV band. There are white spaces in other bands as well. I think the immediate focus, though, of regulators around the world who are looking at white spaces is to let's establish the TV band first, get that firmly established, and then I think what will happen is that once that's done, some attention will look at some of the other bands. And it's not just about the UK or the US or Europe or developed countries. It could be argued, in fact, that some of the greatest benefits of white space may well lie in developing countries. And in fact, there's various statistics that are published, but some 80% of people still don't have connectivity to the internet in many of those countries because it remains largely unaffordable. And last year, the ITU Broadband Commission published a report, and I think Chapter 3 of that report focuses on the impact that internet connectivity has on essentially contributing to the UN Millennium Development Goals or achievement of those goals. So I think what we will see, we've started to get involved in some pilot projects in Africa, and there's various other projects that are starting to kick off there as well at the moment. So I think we will see white space being applied in those areas as well, where people are potentially, whole villages or towns are potentially hundreds of miles away from any fibre backbone, and in some cases, or many cases actually, even from any electricity supplies. So another aspect in the bottom left-hand corner, another aspect that we're looking at here, it's not just about the radio technology, it's also about how do you power the radios, and so this is a prototype mast which is powered by a combination of solar power and wind power in order to power the radios, so that you don't need to deal with the issue of trying to get electricity cables to the site. So anyway, that's been a fairly sort of fairly quick, fairly brief, high-level overview of white space and rural broadband and its application to rural broadband. And you may like to go and have a look at our website and find out a little bit more. Thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions for any of our panellists. So anybody like to raise any points or issues from any of the presentations? Can you give your name and organisation, please?
My name's Graham Gordon. I'm the CEO of a company called Internet for Business. So we're an ISP and a managed services provider based in Scotland. I'd be interested to hear what the panel's thoughts are on the public sector investing in poles and holes, fibre, copper infrastructure, and actually the public sector owning that. Do you think that's the right thing to be doing, or should there be stimulating investment in infrastructure through subsidies, grants, initiatives which are sustainable rather than through ownership?
Anyone like to field that one, or a short comment from all three, perhaps? Karin?
I can start. Well, we face that discussion all over Europe today. And it's interesting to see the different lessons learned from it, actually. If we look at the Nordics, they started with subsidies, pure subsidies. Eastern Europe today is a mixture. And what we clearly can see is if you get involved like that, it needs to be very clearly monitorized and see where it really ends up and to follow it up. Because that is a lesson, at least from the new big projects launched, that when you monitorize it and when you follow it closely and see what it really gives in the end, to give it a target, that's really important. Because in the beginning of 2000, it was only money being spread out, and that doesn't work. And a co-op between the government or local communities, municipalities, and public-private partnerships is really definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I would just echo the sentiment that I think sustainability of the business case is one of the key things. You know, you can invest in the capital infrastructure, but it has to be sustainable. And I guess there's various models. One of the models that we haven't been directly involved in, but we've been looking at and speaking to some people about is the cooperative model, or and there are various types of cooperative models as well, where it's not public sector ownership or anything like that, but it's also not just business private sector either. But I think the ownership and operating models, are maybe one of an interesting challenge actually, particularly for those areas where market failure has to date existed.
I guess my take on that, and there are a couple of good examples in the UK, even in England actually. There's 9X, and I think John Moore and Andy Lister are here. Public sector investment in Halls, and a successful investment. South Yorkshire Digital Region, less so. And those are all based on market failure. Now, I think the whole point about this is there's a lot of hurdles to go through, state aid hurdles to go through to begin with, there's competitional hurdles. But if there's no other way, and if a political ambition is to invest to promote its region as a better place for people, for inward investment in particular, then perhaps it's the route that should be considered.
Given the time and the fact that we're moving into breakout sessions now, I'd like to just conclude there by thanking our panel, Karin and David and Simon. Thank you very much for your presentations and discussion. Thank you.